We live in a world where most of us are caught in a web of self-identification. From the moment we wake up in the morning, we begin to define ourselves. We are parents, workers, students, teachers. We are the ones who go to the gym, read books, or attend meetings. Our lives are made up of labels that we attach to ourselves, one after the other, like layers of paint on a canvas. But the question arises, are we really these labels? Are we truly the identities we think we are, or are we merely a collection of thoughts and images that we've created for ourselves over time? The truth is that the self we cling to is an illusion. We convince ourselves that we are separate from the world, that we are distinct individuals with our own unique identity. We create a story about who we are, and we play the role with great fervor, thinking that we are the star of the show. But if you stop for a moment and truly inquire into the nature of this self, you will find that it is nothing more than a fleeting and ever-changing construct, an idea in the mind that has no true permanence. We are told from a young age that we must find our identity, establish who we are, and define ourselves in relation to the world. But this very idea of finding yourself is a paradox. You cannot find something that is already here. The truth is that we have never been separate from the world. We have never been separate from the people around us, the trees, the sky, or the earth beneath our feet. The idea of self is something that arises in the mind, but it is not the whole picture. When we closely examine the idea of self, we see that it is made up of memories, experiences, and thoughts, none of which are permanent. The person you think you are today is not the same person you were yesterday, and you won't be the same person tomorrow. You are constantly changing, evolving, becoming something new with each passing moment. Yet we cling to this idea of a fixed identity as if it were something real, something solid, something that can define us. The truth is that the self is like a wave in the ocean, constantly shifting, never the same twice, and yet we try to grasp it, hold it, and label it. What happens when we let go of this illusion of a fixed self? What happens when we stop identifying with the roles we play, the thoughts we think, and the labels we attach to ourselves? The answer is profound. We realize that we are not separate at all. We are not separate from the people we interact with, nor are we separate from the world around us. We are part of an endless flow, a continuous unfolding of life itself. When you let go of the ego, the self, you open yourself up to the possibility of experiencing life as it truly is, a vast, interconnected web of being. The problem, however, is that we are often so attached to the idea of self that we cannot fathom what life would be like without it. We have been taught to believe that who we are is tied to the roles we play, the things we do, and the way we think. We believe that our value is defined by how we compare to others, by how much we accomplish, and by how well we perform in the eyes of society. But in truth, we are not the sum of our actions, our possessions, or our achievements. We are not the labels we wear or the roles we take on. We are not even the thoughts that pass through our minds. The self, in all its forms, is simply an illusion. When we finally begin to see the illusion of self-identity, we realize that there is no need to find ourselves. The self is not something that can be discovered or attained. It is something that is always present, always here, always unfolding. It is not something you can grasp or hold onto. It is not something you can control or define. It simply is, and so we must learn to embrace the mystery of who we are. We must learn to let go of the need for definition, for control, for permanence. The self is like a cloud, constantly shifting, never fixed, and yet an integral part of the sky. We cannot hold onto the cloud, for if we do, we miss the beauty of the sky itself. The same is true with the self. When we stop holding onto the illusion of who we think we are, we become more open to the world, more attuned to the flow of life, and more connected to the vastness of existence. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, I am this, I am that, remember that these thoughts are just passing clouds. They are not the essence of who you are. You are not the person you think you are. You are the vastness of the ocean, the sky, the universe itself, forever in motion, forever unfolding, forever beyond definition. The real you cannot be defined. It can only be experienced when you stop clinging to the illusion of self and open yourself to the infinite flow of life. The self is a mysterious thing, isn't it? We spend our entire lives trying to understand it, to define it, to shape it into something that feels solid and real. But the more we look for it, the more elusive it becomes. We cannot capture the self like we might capture a butterfly with our hands. The harder we try, the more it slips through our fingers. From the moment we are born, we begin to build this sense of self, layer by layer. We take on the labels given to us by society, by our family, by our experiences. We are told who we are, our name, our gender, our role in the world. These are markers, yes, but they don't define the true nature of the self. The truth is, the self cannot be boxed in by words or labels. It is not something that can be fully known or contained. This brings us to a profound realization. The self is unknowable. We think that by thinking about ourselves, by analyzing our thoughts, we can understand who we are. But this is like trying to capture the wind in a jar. No matter how much we study, how much we dissect, the essence of the self remains beyond our grasp. It is not something you can pin down with your intellect or control with your mind. It is fluid, it is ever-changing, and it exists in a state of constant becoming, and yet this unknowability is not something to fear. It is a freedom. The self is not a rigid, fixed entity that we must constantly mold and shape. It is more like a river, forever flowing, forever in motion, never exactly the same twice. We may try to define the river, to name it, but no name can truly capture its essence. It is the very act of flowing that defines it, not any single moment or form it takes. So, if the self is unknowable, what does this mean for us? It means that the more we try to control our identity, the more we are trapping ourselves in a false understanding of who we are. The ego, this sense of a solid, unchanging self, is an illusion. It is something we create in our minds to give us a sense of security, a sense of permanence. But in truth, we are not static beings. We are dynamic, ever-evolving processes. We are not separate from life, but deeply interconnected with it. To define ourselves, to limit ourselves, is to misunderstand the vastness of our being. When we embrace the unknowable nature of the self, we find freedom. We stop trying to be something we are not. We let go of the need for certainty, for control. We stop identifying with the labels that we have clung to so tightly and begin to experience ourselves as a part of the whole. Just as the river flows without concern for its name, we too can flow with life, not bound by the past or the future, but alive in the present moment. This does not mean we abandon our sense of self entirely. It means we stop trying to control it, to fix it, to make it something that conforms to a rigid idea. Instead, we allow it to unfold naturally, to evolve as it will. The true self is like the wind. It is here, it moves, and it can't be captured. It is not something you possess, but something you are a part of. And so, the unknowable nature of the self invites us to live in the present, to surrender to the mystery of existence. It frees us from the weight of our own expectations and allows us to experience life as it is, not as we think it should be. When we stop seeking to define the self, we can simply be, and in that being, we come to realize that we are not separate from anything at all. So, I invite you to let go of the need to understand the self completely, to grasp it, to define it. Allow it to be what it is, unpredictable, flowing, mysterious. And in that surrender, you will discover a peace that comes from simply being alive, from being part of the ever-changing dance of existence. Ah, yes, the illusion of separation. Perhaps the grandest trick of the human mind, the idea that you are somehow a thing apart, standing against the world, observing it from behind the eyes as if encased in a shell, watching the unfolding universe from a safe and sealed distance. But what if this is not how things are at all? What if the sense of being separate is not a truth, but a trance, a hypnotic spell woven by language, culture, and our own desperate craving for identity? You see, from early on, we are taught that there is a me in here and a world out there. We are taught to think in opposites, self and other, mind and body, man and nature, good and bad. But this is only a way of thinking, not a reflection of reality. It's a game of classification, useful at times, yes, but utterly deceptive if mistaken for truth. The moment we take these concepts too seriously, we begin to live as though we are isolated fragments, like leaves severed from the tree of life. But have you ever tried to draw a boundary between yourself and the universe? Where do you begin, and where does the rest of the world end? Is your skin the boundary? What about the air you breathe, the light that enters your eyes, the food that becomes your body, the people whose thoughts and feelings shape your own? Are you not, in every moment, being changed by the world and changing it in return? Is there ever truly a line between you and everything else, or is that line only a mental habit? The truth is that we are not things in a world of things. We are patterns in a web of relations, flowing events in a larger rhythm. You are not a separate self, dropped into the universe like a pebble into a pond. You are the pond and the ripple and the movement of the ripple, an inseparable expression of the whole process. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, you are not separate from life. You are life, expressing itself as the form you currently take. But this illusion of separation, no, how convincing it can be. We build entire lives around it. We compete, we defend, we struggle, we suffer, all because we believe ourselves to be isolated egos trying to control a world that seems indifferent or even hostile. Yet the fear and anxiety we experience so often stem from this root misunderstanding. It's like living inside a dream where we believe ourselves to be alone, unaware that we are dreaming at all. Even our spiritual striving can become entangled in this illusion. We think we must find unity, as if it's somewhere far away. But unity is not a thing to be attained. It is the very nature of existence itself. You don't need to become one with the universe. You already are. It's just that the mind, in its cleverness, has talked you out of seeing it. Once this is seen clearly, not as an idea but as an inner realization, everything changes. The boundaries you thought were real begin to dissolve. You don't stop being you, but the you expands. You begin to feel that your heartbeat is not merely your own. It is the drum of the cosmos. The trees breathe with you, the rivers flow through your blood. The stars are not distant lights, but echoes of the same fire that burns in your chest. And with this shift, a great peace arises. Not the peace of having figured everything out, but the peace of no longer needing to. For you realize that you were never apart, never alone, never separate. The illusion is just that, an illusion, and behind it life moves on, unbothered, eternal, whole. So perhaps the invitation is not to fight the illusion, nor to cling to it, but to see it for what it is, smoke and mirrors on the surface of a deep, boundless mystery, and once you see through it, even for a moment, you return, not to something new, but to something you have never left. The ego, that persistent whisper in the mind saying "I," is not some fixed entity living at the center of your being. It is not a thing you can locate with a scalpel, nor a piece of architecture built into your biology. Rather, it is a social construct, an idea, a performance, a narrative stitched together by language, memory, and the expectations of others. We mistake it for who we are, but it is more like a mask, worn for the sake of the play, and we have simply forgotten that we are actors. From the earliest moments of life, the world begins to hand us labels. You are a boy, a girl, a student, a citizen. You are smart, shy, polite, troublesome. Slowly but surely, we gather these descriptions and string them together into a kind of mental scrapbook. We call this collection me, but who authored these pages? Much of what we believe about ourselves didn't originate from within, but from without. Parents, teachers, society, they handed us pieces of identity, and we assembled them into an ego, never stopping to ask who was doing the assembling, or if it needed to be done at all. This is not to say that ego is evil. It serves a function. Like a name tag at a party, it helps us navigate the dance of social life. But the trouble arises when we confuse the name tag for the dancer. When we begin to believe that we are only the role we play, we cut ourselves off from the vastness of our being. The ego at that point becomes a prison of our own making. It limits us to what is known, what is approved, what is safe. It is concerned with image, reputation, control, but none of these things are truly you. The irony is that we chase self-worth through the ego, when it is the ego that breeds our deepest insecurity. Because the ego is built from comparison. It is always measuring, am I better than, less than, more successful, more attractive, more important. It thrives on being someone, and dreads the idea of being no one. But in this very striving, we create suffering. We fear losing status, failing expectations, being rejected. Why? Because the ego believes that without its social story, we are nothing. But this is simply not true. Beneath the surface of the ego, there is a stillness that does not require praise or identity. There is an aliveness that is not dependent on roles. You do not have to be somebody to be real. You do not have to be admired to be worthy. You already are, not because you've earned it or built it, but because you exist, and existence itself, in all its mystery, has never asked you to prove your value. Only the ego does that, and if you can begin to see the ego not as a villain but as a conditioned habit, a social reflex, then you are free not to destroy it, but to hold it lightly, to smile at it, to use it when needed like a tool, but not mistake it for your true nature. The ego will still speak, but you no longer need to believe all it says. It will still want to be special, to be admired, but you will see that those desires are just echoes of a larger game. What you are, beyond the social self, beyond the mental chatter, is not separate from the world around you. You are not a stranger to existence, but its expression. When you release the need to defend your image, you find that life becomes softer, more fluid. You are no longer imprisoned by the opinions of others, nor enslaved to the idea of what you should be. You begin to live, not as an ego, but as a presence, spacious, awake, and whole. And so the ego may remain, as all illusions do, but it no longer drives the ship. It becomes background noise to a much deeper song, the song of being itself. And in that song there is no need to be someone. There is only the unfolding, the play, the dance, and you are free to dance with it. The self is not a thing. It is not an object you can grasp, pin down, or define once and for all. It is not something fixed, frozen, or enclosed within the boundaries of your skin. No, the self is a dynamic process, a living, breathing unfolding that flows like a river and shifts like the wind. And yet we go through life under the illusion that there is some solid I, at the core of our being, a constant little watcher sitting behind our eyes, steering the ship, making the choices, claiming ownership of the body and mind as if they were mere tools of its will. But this idea, this I, is a fiction, a convenience, a kind of linguistic shorthand. The truth is far more fluid, far more mysterious. You do not wake up each day the same person. Your body is in flux. Your cells are dying and being reborn. Your thoughts are not yesterday's thoughts, your moods, your memories, your attention. They all shift. Even your name, your story, your personality, these are just patterns, familiar loops in the dance, not permanent realities. The self is not a noun, it is a verb. It is not something you are, it is something you do. A continuous becoming, a symphony of sensations, thoughts, relationships, and perceptions all happening in exquisite rhythm with the rest of existence. But the mind, oh, the mind loves to freeze things. It wants to hold life in place like a photograph and say, "This is me." It wants to define, categorize, control. It says, "I am this, not that. I was this, and I will be that." Yet none of these definitions can ever fully capture the living pulse of what you are. They are useful, of course necessary even for navigating daily life, but they are not the whole truth. You are not a static character in a storybook. You are the unfolding of the story itself. Think of a flame. It holds a shape, yes, but it is never still. It burns, it dances, it consumes and transforms. So it is with the self. The moment we try to grasp it, we miss it. The self is not to be located, but to be lived. It is a wave in the ocean, not separate from the sea, but a particular expression of its movement. And just as the wave rises and falls without clinging, the self too is meant to arise and pass freely, moment to moment. What gives rise to this illusion of a fixed self is our clinging to continuity. We want something stable to hold on to in a world that constantly changes. But stability is not the same as truth. We invent this sense of identity as a defense against the uncertainty of life, but in doing so, we create the very tension and fear we try to avoid. We forget that freedom lies not in fixing ourselves, but in allowing ourselves to flow, to evolve, to shift and change as naturally as the seasons, the tides, the moon. And once you see the self as a process, everything softens. You no longer need to be consistent, because there is nothing to defend. You no longer need to fit into a box, a label, a role. You can speak freely, live honestly, and let yourself be new. You discover that your value does not come from how well you maintain the image of who you've been, but from the authenticity with which you meet the present moment. This dynamic nature of the self is not a flaw. It is your freedom. You are not stuck. You are not trapped. You are not required to remain who you were yesterday. The river does not apologize for bending, for rushing, for changing course, nor should you. Let the self be what it is, an ever-unfolding mystery, a dance of form and emptiness, a process too alive to be pinned down, and in that realization perhaps the most beautiful thing arises, a deep and quiet peace, not because you've found yourself, but because you've stopped needing to. The ego is a peculiar thing. It is both the mask and the actor, both the illusion and the believer of that illusion. It arises as a point of reference, a center from which we seem to perceive the world. I see, I think, I want, I suffer. But what is this I? Where does it dwell? We search for it in the body, in the brain, in thought, but we never quite find it. Like a mirage shimmering in the heat, it appears vividly real until we reach out and try to grasp it. Then it vanishes, leaving only the movement of thought in its place. And yet, This illusion of the ego is what most of us live by. We go about our lives assuming a solid self, a controller behind the scenes, a captain at the helm of this body and mind. We identify with our thoughts, our memories, our name, our face in the mirror. We say, "That is me," but what we really mean is, "That is the story I've come to believe." And the paradox is that this story, though empty of substance, carries immense power. It drives us to strive, to fear, to defend, to desire. It creates our suffering even as it claims to seek our happiness. You see, the ego pretends to be the source of action when it is in fact a consequence. Thoughts arise, and the ego says, "I thought that." Emotions bubble up, and the ego says, "I am angry." But the ego is always late to the party, taking credit for what was already happening. It is not the author of your experience. It is the commentator, the narrator who steps in after the fact and declares ownership, and yet we believe it, we bow to it, we obey its every judgment. But here lies the paradox. The more you try to dissolve the ego, the more you reinforce it. The very effort to get rid of the ego is often just another move by the ego itself, disguised as spirituality. It says, "I am someone who has no ego," and in doing so, it inflates itself all the more. This is the cosmic joke. The ego cannot be destroyed by force, by denial, or by rejection. It fades only when it is seen clearly, like mist evaporating in the morning sun. The ego is not your enemy. It is a tool, an interface for navigating the world of form. It is useful, necessary even, for functioning in society, for using language, for remembering your name. But it becomes tyrannical when mistaken for your essence. When you believe you are the ego, you suffer. When you see the ego for what it is, a temporary performance, a character in a play, you begin to loosen your grip. You start to laugh at it, and in that laughter you become free. The irony is that the ego, in its desperate need to be someone, ends up missing the vastness of being. It tries so hard to hold things together, to control the narrative, to secure an identity, when in truth what you are needs no definition. You are not the little voice in your head, you are not the mental chatter. You are the awareness in which it all appears, the open space, the silent witness, the ungraspable presence that remains when all stories fall away. And so, the paradox of the ego is this. It is both the veil and the invitation. It conceals the truth even as it pushes us toward it. It is the knot that, once recognized, unties itself, not by effort but by insight, not by struggle but by surrender. And when that knot loosens, you discover that you were never separate, never alone, never bound. The ego was just a ripple on the surface, momentary, beautiful, and never quite real. We move through life as if we are the masters of our fate, the authors of our story, the architects of every thought, choice, and action. From the moment we wake to the moment we sleep, there's this quiet sense, sometimes proud, sometimes anxious, that I am doing this. I am thinking these thoughts, making these plans, fixing these problems. It's an idea so embedded in our daily experience that we rarely pause to question it. But when we look closely, really closely, we begin to notice something strange. The sense of control is just that, a sense, a feeling. Not a fact. Thoughts arise. Do you summon them? Do you decide the next word that will pop into your mind, or the next image, or the next wave of emotion? If you watch with care, you'll see that these things happen spontaneously. Like weather passing through the sky, they come and go without asking your permission, and yet the ego rushes in afterward and takes ownership. I thought that. I chose that. I am responsible. But that's a bit like someone standing on a beach, watching the tide roll in and declaring, "I made the waves." This isn't to say that there's no rhythm or direction to your life. Clearly there is. But it arises not from a central controller, not from some little homunculus sitting behind your eyes pulling levers, but from the entire unfolding of existence itself. You are not standing outside the universe steering it. You are the universe, moving in one of its infinitely intricate forms. The breeze doesn't control where it blows, the flame doesn't decide how to dance, and you likewise are part of the whole, a happening, not a separate doer. But the illusion of control is seductive. It gives us a sense of agency, of power, of safety. And it terrifies us with the thought of losing that control. We strive endlessly to manage life, to get it right, to protect ourselves from uncertainty. Yet the more we cling to control, the more anxious we become. Because life does not follow our scripts. It resists our plans, ignores our expectations. It moves in its own wild, mysterious way, and when it does, we suffer, because we believed it should have gone differently. Freedom, however, does not lie in gaining control. It lies in releasing the illusion of it, not in becoming passive or fatalistic, but in relaxing the grasp of the ego, in surrendering to the flow. When you stop needing to control everything, you begin to dance with life rather than fight it. You see that what arises does so not from your effort alone, but from the totality. The wind, the stars, your ancestors, the food you ate, the thoughts you read, the dreams you forgot. Everything is connected, and your part in it is real, but not solitary. To live without the illusion of control is to live lightly. It is to act, to choose, to move, but without the burden of believing you are the sole source of those actions. It is to trust the movement of life, even when it doesn't fit your narrative. It is to be humble, curious, open. And strangely, it is in this letting go that we find a deeper power, not the power of domination or certainty, but the power of alignment, of harmony, of grace. So, perhaps you are not the puppet master you imagined. Perhaps you are the puppet and the wind and the hand moving the strings all at once. Perhaps the beauty of life is not in controlling it, but in being fully present for its unfolding, like music that plays itself through you, like waves that rise and fall without effort. And in that surrender there is peace. The ego, that persistent little voice in your head whispering me, mine, I am this, is not your enemy, nor is it your truth. It is a tool, a mask, a lens through which experience is filtered and labeled. But the problem arises when we forget it's a mask, when we begin to believe that the one who is angry, afraid, or proud is some solid, permanent self, that must be defended, glorified, or fixed. In truth, the ego is only a wave on the surface of the vast ocean that you truly are, and the moment you see that clearly, not just intellectually, but directly in your bones, a great freedom dawns. It is the freedom of being no one in particular, not in the sense of being lost or meaningless, but in the sense of being unbound, because as long as you are trying to live up to the story of who you think you are, or who you think others think you are in a prison, a subtle, invisible prison made of self, image, and expectation. You walk through life constantly editing yourself, checking yourself, measuring your worth against illusions. But when the grip of the ego loosens, all of that starts to fall away. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to win the imaginary game. You simply asterisk are asterisk. This freedom is not loud or dramatic. It doesn't puff up the chest or shout from rooftops. It is quiet like a soft exhale. It is the relief of putting down a heavy load you didn't realize you were carrying, and suddenly you begin to notice things you missed before, the rustle of the leaves, the warmth in someone's eyes. The incredible aliveness of each passing moment, because you're no longer wrapped up in your internal narrative, you're no longer the star of the show, just part of the unfolding play. This is not a loss of identity. It's the discovery that identity is fluid, playful, and ultimately secondary to the fact of your being. You are not the story, you are not the thoughts, you are not even the personality, you are the awareness in which all of it appears. Timeless, spacious, free, and in that space beyond the ego, love begins to flow more freely. Not love as a transaction or a possession, but as a natural expression of being. You start to see others not as competitors or threats or mirrors of your own insecurities, but as fellow waves in the same ocean. The boundaries soften, compassion grows, and the old fear, the old need to defend and control loses its grip. To live from this freedom is not to reject the ego or destroy it, but to hold it lightly, playfully, to use it when it's needed, like a costume in a drama, and set it down when it's not. It's to recognize that you are not confined to any name, role, or definition. You are the dance itself, not just the dancer, the sky, not just the cloud. So let the ego play its part, but know that you are not it. You are not that narrow cell, image struggling to survive. You are the vast, open field in which it all arises and passes away. And in realizing this, you become truly alive, not as someone special, not as someone enlightened, but simply as what you already are, free, here and profoundly enough. Spiritual awakening is not the acquisition of something new. It is not a medal to be earned or a secret to be uncovered by a clever mind. It is, quite simply, the remembrance of what has always been, and that's the beauty of it. It is not about becoming anything. It is about unbecoming all the things you thought you had to be. All the labels, all the striving, all the noise of identity and ambition. They begin to fall away, not with effort, but like autumn leaves drifting from the branches when the season changes. What awakens is not the ego dressed in white robes. What awakens is the timeless presence that has been silently watching, even as the ego has been acting out its endless dramas. You see, it's rather like waking up from a dream, not because the dream was bad, but because you realize it was only a dream. Life, in its raw and unfiltered essence, becomes luminous again. The ordinary becomes extraordinary, not because anything changed, but because you stopped looking at it through the fog of separation. The awakened mind no longer divides the world into me and not me. It no longer insists on carving up reality into tiny boxes labeled right and wrong, mine and theirs, sacred and profane. It sees the world as one undivided movement, endlessly dancing, endlessly changing, and yet deeply still beneath the surface. The tree is no longer just a tree, it is a miracle. The sound of rain becomes a kind of music. Even pain, even sorrow, is met with a curious openness as part of the great unfolding. This awakening is not a state you enter and then keep forever, like a souvenir from some spiritual vacation. No, it comes and goes like the breath. It flickers in moments of deep stillness, of honest laughter, of quiet surrender, and then the ego returns, tapping you on the shoulder, whispering stories of who you are and what you need. But once you've glimpsed the truth, even for a moment, it leaves a scent behind, a kind of perfume that never fully fades, and in time that fragrance begins to guide you back to what is real. Awakening doesn't make you special. In fact, it tends to dissolve the whole idea of being special. You begin to see that everyone is already divine, already whole, whether they know it or not. You stop trying to wake people up. Instead, you meet them where they are, with gentleness, with humor, with love. You realize that even the illusion is part of the play. Even the sleep is sacred. There's nothing to attain, no finish line to cross. Spiritual awakening is not the end of the path. It is the beginning of seeing that there never was a path, only the present moment, stretching in all directions forever. You don't have to go anywhere. You just have to notice where you already are. So be still, breathe, let go, not of the world, but of the filters through which you've been seeing it. Let yourself be no one for a moment. Let the silence speak. Let life, in all its rawness and wonder, come rushing in. You are not separate from it. You never were, and now. Perhaps you remember. Living in harmony is not about perfecting the world around you. It is about attuning yourself to the rhythm that is already playing. Like a leaf that dances with the breeze, or a river that curves effortlessly around the rocks, harmony is not something you impose. It is something you join. But to do that, you must first stop the frantic attempt to control the tempo. You must become still enough to hear the music beneath the noise. We spend so much time trying to fix things, our relationships, our futures, our own minds, as if life were some broken machine in need of our constant repair. But what if there is nothing to fix? What if things are not happening to you, but through you? What if every moment, no matter how messy or painful, is not a mistake, but a movement in a greater song? Harmony begins not with answers, but with listening. Listening not just with the ears, but with your whole being. Listening to the world, to the wind, to the spaces between words. And most importantly, listening to yourself, not the thoughts that clamor for attention, but the quiet knowing that hums underneath them all. That stillness is not empty. It is full of intelligence, of presence, of truth. To live in harmony is to allow the rain to fall, the tears to come, the laughter to rise. It is not passive, not a resignation, but a surrender to what is, because in that surrender you are no longer fighting life. You are dancing with it, and you begin to see that you do not have to become someone else to be at peace. You only have to stop resisting what you already are. Even conflict, even chaos, has its place. Night follows day, storms nourish the soil. Harmony doesn't mean that everything is always smooth. It means you trust the movement, you trust the cycle, you trust the whole. You see that what you once called wrong might simply be misunderstood. That what you once called other is not separate from you at all. Living in harmony is not about escaping the world or silencing your desires. It's about seeing desire not as a chain, but as a wave. Let it rise, let it fall. Don't cling, don't push. Let everything come and go, and remain rooted in the awareness that watches it all. That awareness is your true nature. It is calm, vast, untouched by the highs and lows of the story. And when you live from that place, everything begins to change, not because the world bends to your will, but because you are no longer trying to bend the world. You meet others with less judgment, because you are no longer judging yourself. You walk more slowly, speak more gently, love more freely, because you are not trying to prove anything. You are simply being. Harmony then is not an achievement. It is a remembering that you are not a separate note trying to be heard over the symphony. You are the symphony itself, echoing in 1,000 forms, from a bird's song to a sigh in the dark. And when you let go of the illusion of separation, even for a moment, you feel it. That soft, timeless truth, you belong. You always have, and so live not perfectly, but fully. Let each breath be an act of participation. Let each moment be enough. Let the world be your mirror, your teacher, your song. You are not here to conquer life. You are here to harmonize with it, and in doing so you find not just peace, but the quiet joy of being exactly where you are, exactly as you are, in the great unfolding dance of it all.